Hello everybody, we're going back to Skyrim today for some more advanced tips. Now before I go ahead with this, let me just explain the way the mod system works in Bethesda's games. See, because this is about all of Bethesda's games, is the last mod loaded overrides previous mods. This is a system we can exploit. This is a system I personally use to allow my mods to talk to each other. This is something people recognise as an impossible thing to do in Bethesda's games. They've said as much several times on the forum when I was modding. I've done it. I got it to work, and I got it to work by creating deliberate conflicts. Unfortunately, people out there like to remove conflicts using tools and therefore break this system and therefore stop it working. So if you know anybody that cleans mods, tell them to get their hands off your mods and not to touch them, otherwise it will break this feature. Now, mod cleaning is usually done by people that don't make mods and therefore don't appreciate the nuances of the system. If they did, they would know the power of this and they wouldn't be trying to break it all the time. So anyhow, if you understand one mod will override another mod if it's run last, you can deliberately plan for this. You could have mods, for instance, here's an example. In Return to Helgen for Skyrim, right, you might have noticed in the old edition, you know, from the original Skyrim, I had the Knights of the Nine Armour says on in the Chapel of Talos during a scene where you were talking to the priest of the Nine. You're talking to him, and his two friends come out of the side and come forward. Now, in SC, they appear to be wearing ebony armour, but if you had the right mod installed by another mod maker, that armour would magically change into Knights of the Nine armour. So you'd see Knights of the Nine coming towards you and stand either side of the priest. This is what I'm talking about. That armour wasn't in my mod. That armour was a conflict. That happened because I deliberately created a conflict between my mod and this guy's armour. So if anybody had that armour installed, his armour would override my armour. Right, see, because I made a fake set of Knight of the Nine armour out of ebony armour. I renamed it, put it in the paths, the same path as this guy's armour, did everything right. So it was an exact copy, except for it wasn't Knights of the Nine armour, it was ebony. And then when you ran his mod after mine, it appeared in my mod as if it was there and meant to be there. This is what I'm talking about. This is the power we have when it comes to using and abusing conflicts in our mods. We don't even have to ask for permission to do this kind of thing, because we're not using anything of the other person's mod in ours. We're just making sure it conflicts in the way we want it to conflict in order to produce the desired result. In my case, it was Knights of the Nine, in Knights of the Nine armour, walking forward, standing next to the priest while you were talking to him in a really, really impressive kind of scene. So understand that not all conflicts are bad, and blindly removing conflicts from mods is bad, right? It is bad, there's no doubt about it. It breaks mods, it stops features from being possible, it limits what you and I as mod makers can do in the game, and quite frankly the people that came up with the idea might have had good intentions, but they've used it as a kind of a bludgeon to batter modders with without any understanding of the harm they're doing. As a mod maker, you are responsible for making sure you don't have unnecessary edits. But if you have got unnecessary edits, and it's easy to do because just looking at an item in the editor can create a mark that says it's been edited when actually it hasn't, right? Your best way of removing it is to use the official system. You get up a list of form IDs from the first menu, select all the ones that shouldn't be there, select delete, or not delete, but you select ignore, right? And when you load it up again, them edits won't be there, right? They'll be gone. There's a little star next to them usually showing that they've been edited. If you recognise something that shouldn't be edited, select it, mark it ignore, save the mod. When you reload the mod, that will be excluded. It won't be loaded. That's how you do it. That's how you do it safely. Anyway, now if you understand the system of overriding another mod, you could override your own work. If you've got sets of armour, for instance, right? and you don't want to merge all mods and stuff and you want it to remain optional, you could use the same system I've just described to make a merchant. If that merchant mod then had fake sets of your armour in it, using say default game armour, so you didn't even have to include textures, you know, keep your mod size fairly small, and you created fake sets of armour, then that merchant would in effect should be selling your armour to everybody, providing they run the actual armour files after the merchant mod. That's just an example. So if you had your merchant mod loaded there, and then 3 sets of different armour, say elfin armour, ebony armour and mithril armour there, right? Just an example. And you wanted these to appear in there. All you do is you make fake sets of armour appear using the same paths, you know, to point to the same files where the other mod would be. So when you actually load in the BSA and ESP mods here, it would override whatever's here. Of course, anything that's loose in your directory will override everything. So basically you want to make sure that your files are not loose. They're packed into the BSA files, your BSA files, and therefore can be overridden by somebody else's BSA files. So you see, we start out with the merchant, loads of armour selections in there, all of it copied from the default game, but with different names. You know, you give it the name of the armour you want it to replace. So in my case, ebony armour became Knights of the Nine, so my merchant would say Knights of the Nine armour and it'd look like ebony. The paths would match the guy's Knights of the Nine armour, and then when you loaded the Knights of the Nine armour from that guy, after that it would appear in my merchant as on sale. You see, providing that guy's armour was in there, that merchant would be able to sell that guy's armour because it matched. And providing the guy who did the Knights of the Nine armour didn't change any of the paths, it would still be in there. So you guys out there want to make a merchant that sells everybody's armour, you can do it. You don't need permission of the original mod maker, because the original mod maker will not actually have any of his files in your mod. You'll only be using default game assets and you'll be relying on conflicts to do all the work. So in this way, if you see dozens and dozens and dozens of armour that you like, you can support it directly in your mod using that same system. It's all about matching the paths and creating a conflict where one didn't previously exist, then telling your users to run the mods after yours. So the armour gets run after your merchant mod, and then your merchant will be able to sell their armour without ever having it in the mod. That same trick works on a lot of different ways. You can, for instance, right, if you had a rock in this mod and you placed it in a barrel, well, not necessarily in a barrel, but in a place somewhere in the world, you could have another mod say, is there a rock at this location? If there is, we know that other mod's installed and we can interact with it. Or you can keep it nice and simple, like I did. Like Ottolino, he did an Enclave mod, which was in Fallout New Vegas, and I made a Code of Steel mod. So I had a patrol up to where I knew his front door was, and every time the Brotherhood of Steel came by his base, there'd be a bit of a battle because I was being a knob. But anyhow, it was just a bit of fun, right? It was a bit of fun. But I think you can create these situations. In them situations though, you have to basically use the default game factions that are known to be enemies and put them on your own troops. So when they walk towards each other, they start fighting. Right? But these kind of conflicts all work in our favour and are worth exploring, because quite frankly, that's where the fun is, right there. Like I said though, these mod cleaning types, they break all this, they prevent all this from being possible. They actively limit our options in this area. Because not all conflicts are bad, some of them are deliberate, some of them give us benefits and give us features, and the people cleaning the mods don't know that. They just lack the experience to understand that. Anyway, right? I hope you understand now, right, from the limited examples I've given you today, that not all of these things are bad, and sometimes you can plan And you can make mods with these things in mind. Right now, for instance, I've given you one idea there where you could make the ultimate armor store without ever having to ask for permission from anybody and not having to include anybody else's files, simply by matching their paths. So if you want to do that, go right ahead. It requires no permissions because you're not using any of their files. Nothing in that mod or in your mod, right, would come from any of their mods. You just copied their paths. Although technically speaking, right, if you're going to do it, it's usually nice to tell the other modder you're going to do it, just so he knows, right? Because he could break your mod simply by changing his paths if you don't. It's just common courtesy, really. But in reality, you wouldn't have to say a thing. Anyway, there we go. We're going to leave it at 10 minutes. That's another tip there for you for the Bethesda series of games. It works. I've used it several times. It's why all my mods communicate with each other, because I've used this in so many different ways, right? I've made conflicts, you know, dance to my tune. I've literally done everything that they said shouldn't be done and came out a winner. Because I understand how the game works. I've used the game system, the official game system, the official way. I know its advantages and disadvantages, and I'm good at exploiting them. And you can be too if you put some thought into this. And I mean put some thought into this, because it's not just a simple case of overriding paths. There's lots of other options here. The more you explore it, the better you will be. And then you'll be able to dance around like a harlequin on hot coals and not get your feet burnt, and people think this guy's a master at his art. Literally, because you will be doing the impossible. And the impossible, in the case of Bethesda's mods, is mods aren't supposed to be able to talk to each other. But as we all know, right, there are ways of making that happen. So, you learn those ways. The easiest way, by the way, is an ESM file, just so you know. But you don't need an ESM file to do it. You can do that without an ESM file using the tricks I've explained in this video. See you in the next one.